Hello, my name is Jonathan Swift, the Content Director of Infopro Digital's Insurance Division, and I'd like to welcome you to another Insurance COVID Cast. Now today, in this COVID Cast, we will explore how a reinvigorated and reimagined workplace might benefit employees, staff, customers and shareholders, building on the lessons of lockdown to create a more productive and engaged workforce post-COVID-19. And I'm delighted to say, joining me for today's COVID Cast, we have Annette Andrews, the former Chief People Officer at Lloyds and a partner co-founder of Fragile to Agile, Mark Huxley, the founder and chairman of Cognitive Risk, Julie Page, the Aon UK CEO, Keith Richards, CEO of the Personal Finance Society and Managing Director of Engagement at the Chartered Insurance Institute, Chris Simpson, Director of HR Munich Re Specialty Group, and finally, Lizzie Tyler, Head of People at TL Dallas & Co. Welcome all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, and I'll come to you on this, Lizzie, focusing purely on insurance employees, what do you think have been the biggest lessons learned from companies having entire workforces operating remotely during the COVID-19 pandemic, both positive and negative?
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. I think, first of all, the adaptability and the speed at which, as an industry, we have had to obviously implement remote working. I think individuals have had to adapt, companies have had to adapt, employers, our clients, everybody. And if you'd have asked me 4 months ago, do I think that that's possible? Of course, we would have laughed about it and said absolutely not. And it just goes to show what is possible. So I think for me, adaptability is certainly a positive, and the speed at which we've been able to do that. And I will touch upon, there are some negatives that come along with the speed of that change, but I'll focus on the positives to start with. I think, again, flexibility. People are managing their work-life balance or are allowing themselves to work differently. And certainly at TL Dallas, we're quite a traditional SME, family-owned independent insurance broker. But traditionally 9 till 5, that's had to go out of the window somewhat, whilst you're juggling. So I've currently got a child, next door, but yes, I'm sat here talking to you. So I think the flexibility side of things, we have created a theme. So we have Wellness Wednesdays. So under normal circumstances, I go for a run at lunchtime as well on a Wednesday, and this evening there's about 25% of the workforce, we all do a meditation circle. We all do meditate in our own way, in our own environments, etc. And I think another 2 things really that I would highlight as a positive are efficiencies. I can't speak for everybody, but certainly on the 2 boards that I sit, quite interestingly, I would say that we both feel that we are more efficient via Zoom. Perhaps that's because we don't have the distractions of being in the office. Again, I'm a trustee at a local charity, and again, we've found exactly the same as a board. And I also think it's given us an opportunity to almost press the pause button and be reflective and ask ourselves questions, why do we do it that way? Challenge our thinking, which I think is a great thing. Some of the negatives, of course, people really are missing human interaction and that human touch, whether or not they would be missing it outside of a pandemic and just because they're remote working. We won't know the answer to that just yet, but I think certainly allowing individuals to feel connected with their team, connected with their employer, connected with their organisation, and of course, without doubt, the impact on mental health. There are certainly some statistics that have come out. The Lancet report that was done just post-lockdown suggests that there's an increase, and certainly twice as many people reporting struggling with anxiety.
Julie?
So for me, they're the main things.
Yeah. Julie, I'll come to you. Obviously, the other end of the broken spectrum, TL Dallas Regional, Aon, obviously much bigger in size.
But remarkably similar in experience. I had a couple of things written down. I had, obviously, the acceleration in agile working. Aon's an agile environment anyway. Everybody, hot desks, including me. And obviously that's a different challenge for return to the office, which I'm sure we'll get onto. So we were very agile, could have done this anyway, but to Lizzie's point, the behavioural challenge of going agile just gets taken out by a crisis that means it's no longer down to you. We're going to do it. So we experienced all the same things, and we've paid attention to all the same things. So it's great to hear that well-being and particularly the mental health agenda has kind of accelerated. And the old taboos of talking about mental health were being eroded anyway, but the speed of erosion now, I think, is almost complete. We're talking about it all of the time. We're creating environments for colleagues to understand how to deal with their situation, whatever their situation is, and also very quickly learning not to make assumptions around what good looks like, and what's good for me is not good for everybody else. So yes, bigger, but exactly the same profile of issues that Lizzie talked about. I think you tackled them really well, Lizzie.
Yeah. Chris, I'll come to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some of the positives, one is that how well technology worked, how well we were able to get on with almost, if I could say it, business as unusual but usual, and everyone was able to really do their job in a remote fashion. May be obvious, but communication. I mean, we could not communicate enough. The venues and the diversity of communications had to change. So we implemented a variety of things. We really used a tool like Yammer to help build community and do a lot of things internally. And honestly, we got to seem to get to know people better remotely as they really open themselves up on these tools like Yammer. We use the executive committee to actually make personal calls to people on a rotating basis. And we got a lot of good information of those on the one-to-one basis. We've never heard of virtual open doors, but now we have them. And how does that work as well? So I think there was a lot of positives there. In addition, the role of the manager really changed a lot. And how do we quickly adapt to that? The traditional manager in the past, we wanted them to become much more of an enabler to their staff, to be that servant leader, champion of their employees. We had to make sure that we were quickly able to provide them information, a bit of training to adapt quickly to that. And hate to say it, many times we just said, throw the handbook out the window. These are individuals. Everyone is different. Talk to them on an individual basis and find out what they need and see how we can adapt to them. Maybe a bit different on a work-life balance. We assumed by going home and working from everything was going to be easy, but we found by 50% of our staff actually found it harder. How do I turn off? It's always there in front of me. So we had to work with that, and the concept of well-being clearly raised in our organization. And then last, as I said earlier, just the sense of lost community was something we try to figure out how to replace. So we could do different charity events, kind of online, or do things to share. It really helped out. People felt that loss of community was something that they were really eager to get back.
Annette?
So everything everyone said absolutely resonates with me. And now that I'm out of Lloyd's and I'm spending a lot of time with other HRDs from organisations cross-sector, do you know what? It's consistent. Two other observations I'd make. The speed of decision-making has just jumped dramatically. Everybody's really keen not to lose that speed of decision-making moving forward. The other thing, well-being has absolutely shot up the agenda, and I think it will stay there now. Great. The thing that we're starting to see is actually there isn't a magical, time when this is going to be over or people are going to be okay. This is going to be long-term now. So how can we keep caring for people? And I think this is a positive and a negative. This has been a much needed fire break for many people. Think about how they've been living their lives and the pace at which they've been working. But actually, it's also made people think about what's important and what they don't want to return back to. So I think there's going to be a lot of pushback and critiquing going forward of, am I prepared to do a 2-hour commute, for example, anymore? Yeah. But that's a positive and a negative, isn't it?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Keith, I'll come to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're all going to violently agree. Someone said recently it brings back the wartime spirit when people are far more tolerant of things like using Skype and technology. And it was very interesting that because we'd already moved to an agile working environment, so a bit like Julie was saying, we were very easily able to adapt very quickly. But what's interesting is some firms that weren't necessarily set up. In fact, it was interesting to talk to one that had a 12-month transition plan to try to turn all their staff into transitional work, and they found themselves within 3 days arriving there. So I think to Annette's point about decision making has been far more rapid. People are far more engaged. So I think there's a lot of positives that have surprised us in our ability to respond when a crisis occurs, simply because we've got no options. I think it's when you try to transition or change things, you always get that natural resistance, people believing that it's got to be face to face. So I think without a question, it's going to have some very positive consequences that will stay with us for a long time. But I think there are some potential unintended consequences that will come in a post return to normal, whatever that is, in environment. But I think absolutely the well-being bit has been at the forefront, and I think that will stay at the top of the agenda now. So I think it's, there's a lot that we'll probably look back and be grateful for, because it's pushed us into places that we believed we were on the journey to achieve, and actually a crisis like this has come along and it's just taken us there.
Mark, perhaps we're gonna, you can answer the question, but also it's worth probably picking up on the point now, which was made by Annette and also Keith. In what ways are employee expectations different now to the ones they held before March 2020, and how will insurance businesses need to change to accommodate them when people return to the office, if indeed they do?
Yeah. I think a couple of closing comments out on the first question that gets to the second. I think it's shown really good leadership among some people that are coming. I think in others, it's shown people up to come a little short. A big part of that is actually the explicit trust that they've actually got to put in people to work remotely. And I think, generally across the board, people have responded enormously well to that, and a different community spirit. I've certainly felt that amongst those that I've come into contact with in that time. So in that need, necessity being the mother of invention, that having to go through the adaptability that was mentioned first off, but also the fact that it just seems to have kind of harbored ideation within a firm. How can we do things slightly different? So I think, to get into your second point, I think that's where a lot of the expectation going forward, people can't go backwards. They've been given that sense of self-empowerment, and that's got to be recognised by the businesses to allow them to carry that on and adapt further. Obviously we're probably going to talk about what does the future of the workplace actually look like later, but it has to be, I think, very much from the lens of the employee, what they need the business to do to them, rather than what is going to be at a time of economic strife, what a business feels it needs to do to itself. And I think if the two dislocate in any material way, there actually could be a real problem of, let's be honest, probably some people on furlough won't come back to the workplace. Those that are in the workplace probably going to feel a little fragile in the environment they're coming back to, and they're going to need to feel that they're included. If they're not, and they're forced back into a regime that doesn't work for them, Matt, your expectation comment, I actually think you could find that talent moving on quite quickly, because Annette said it, they've had this fire break in there. So I think the expectations need to be listened to, because I don't think everybody quite understands what they are at the moment. But definitely, as somebody who probably more deals more onto a strategic development, but more about the people that make a business develop, please do listen to your people and let them have that share of voice at the moment.
Chris?
Yeah, I would have to concur on the last point. There is the need to listen to the voice of your employees, allowing them to have a voice. I mean, we're finding that even where we are today, they continue to demand more flexibility, not just in where they're working, but we're getting a lot of questions, whether it's around benefits, programs, policies, a lot of questions. Why are we doing this now? In the past, it was interesting for us to see that we always had a reason why we couldn't go fully remote. but we just did it, as we said, in 3 days. So I think employees are kind of questioning a lot, and we have to be there and be individuals that are willing to have those open and honest conversations with the staff, more than we ever have in the past, because they've seen some of the other answers just go out the window as they have. So I think that's probably one of the big things that we're seeing from our staff is the increase in their voice.
Yeah. Keith?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, I think we're at risk of violently agreeing with each other. I think similar things across the market. I mean, it is interesting that some firms, it's not all good news. Some firms did get caught out because they didn't have robust continuity planning in place. So I think that's a key learning outcome from this. But I think what we are seeing, certainly across the sector, is actually, in fact, we've got a challenge at the moment where some of our employees are putting in more hours working from home than they did at work, because you don't have that interactive time, the time at the coffee machine, the bit of socializing, which is part of everyone's life. They're kind of sitting in front of a computer, and we only realized with some recent feedback that over 50% of our staff believe that they didn't actually need to operate effectively by going to the office, which I think is a dramatically different statistic than we might have got pre-COVID lockdown. And the interesting part is, of course, we're now realizing some different disciplines. So we're all actually forgetting that people need to have a lunch break, that they may have children at home. So we're all actively putting in more meetings in our diaries than and pretty much picking up on back to back, without realizing that there are some different dynamics that we need to consider for different people working at home. As I say, not least those with families to look after, or of course, occasionally you dial in on Zoom or Teams, and of course you realise someone's sitting in their bedroom because they don't have the luxury of an office, as some people do. So I think this is, it's fascinating, I think, for most because of the way we've responded. What's important for me as well is just how well the sector has responded to looking after their customers, the way in which they've been able to do that. And again, it's really interesting because those with good, robust continuity planning, actually, it's not just about being able to answer the phone or deal with the customer inquiry, it's making sure you've got the right person dealing with that. So that's been an interesting set of dynamics, and the FCA just recently were just kind of engaging with firms again to make sure that they understand their commitments to good customer outcomes in all of this, so that when we return, we don't flip to a style of working that suits and actually forget that we've got end consumers that we've got to look after, especially with some of the challenges we've got around BI and other issues that could be attracting negative public trust in the way the sector operates.
Julie?
I'm enjoying the cat, Jonathan. It's very difficult to
stay
focused as I'm watching your cat going backwards and forwards. Again, agree with much of that. I would say, though, from a broker perspective, we're obviously sort of touching clients. So clients come first in everything that we do. Obviously very pleased that, organisationally we didn't miss a beat. So from a technology perspective, everything stood up for all the reasons that we've talked about before. Just one thing to share with you. We have a human capital business, and they survey firms, not just in financial services or just in insurance, but across the board. Recently undertook a survey just to kind of see what the patterns and the trends are in lockdown. And 94% response rate was that colleague demand now is for agile and home working optionality. So where before that was, to I think everybody's conversation, that was a discussion that you had to navigate, it's going to be less of a navigation now, more of an expectation that where it works for me, it's proven now. So if it works for me, it should work for you too. 31% of those firms reported improved productivity in lockdown. I mean, there are obviously different ways of gauging productivity, and this context is the output for effort. Other things are obviously much more challenging around revenue from a sort of an economically volatile environment, and making sure that you can continue to develop the new business pipeline, which is a different challenge. And I think probably where we come to, if we stay in a digital environment, one thing we haven't learned yet is how you build new relationships. What we're doing is we're operating on existing relationships. And the other point was that 57% of firms responded saying that they're now accelerating their digital agenda. So with that kind of content, you have to believe that we have hit a tipping point in the way we're going to respond to the world of work. I just wanted to pick up on one of the other themes that's developing around the quality of communication. As a global firm, because we're using digital apparatus to talk to one another, it's made the globe quite small. I mean, our global CEO is talking to everybody every week. You know, I'm talking to all of my colleagues in the UK every week. In a way, because we want to communicate and we want to hear back, that using the digital forum and it always did enable, we just didn't do it naturally. We used conversation cascade. And I've definitely had feedback from our colleagues that they want that to continue. You know, they feel now like they're closer to the real messages, closer to the real strategy. They know what we're trying to do organisationally, and they don't want that to fall away. Yes, they do want to get back in their teams. Yes, they do want more interaction, but they certainly don't want the visibility and transparency of connection straight to the top to disappear, because we don't need quite so much digital engagement going forward. You know, I pick up on, I think it was Mark might have said it, but I think everybody said it in one way or another. We just can't afford to lose the voice of our colleagues in all of this, nor to underestimate the impact of leadership, because leadership is a little bit like a gravity well. If the leaders go back and we all go back into an office environment, we'll create a pull. So we kind of need to lead flexibility and agility by example, to allow our colleagues not to believe that we're just going to try and revert back to type.
Lizzie?
Yes, I mean, again, some key themes coming out. One thing that I wrote down is there's no longer one size fits all approach. And I think that's across the board, be it in communication, be it in well-being, be it in flexible working and employee requirements and their expectations. I think there's two other points that I would make, and I think slightly broader thinking. I think what we're also finding is that there are societal changes and things are happening so quickly, and of course they will also have an impact on our employees. So whilst I sit here right now and have an understanding and a pulse survey with some results that tell me, I think that is going to change exceptionally quickly with things that are going on currently in the world. And also around the sort of sustainability agenda. I think it's not just about, I don't need the 2-hour commute, but actually we've seen, the media have published that there have been some real positives outside of, you know, just the world of work from this pandemic. And we don't necessarily want to lose sight of that. And finally, the leadership element. I mean, I wrote down around, for me, it feels as though it's more important now than ever to have a compassionate leadership. And what do I mean by compassionate leadership, and what do I believe demonstrates that? I believe it's about resilience, but equally demonstrating vulnerability and showing vulnerability, and also being empathetic. And I think fundamentally that will be extremely important. And my final point was really more around not just the employees, but coming into insurance from other industries where I've worked previously. I've only worked in insurance now for just coming up to sort of a year. And I think we're in a really unique position. And I'd like to see us as a sector and industry to harness that, because we have so many touch points with our clients, you know, be it all the sectors, hospitality, transport, construction, retail. And there are very few other industries that have the same amount of touch points with their clients as we do. And I think that's a really big strength that we could utilise and harness.
I'll come to you, Annette, and you can comment on what's been said before. But also, I'd like to ask the kind of final question I want to get to, which is, cynics might argue that remote working born out of necessity, which we've talked about, is one thing, but is it conducive to getting the best results in terms of creativity and co-creation, or indeed long-term professional development? Is there any truth in those assertions?
So first of all, let me just finish off the second question. That I absolutely agree with everything that's everybody said. It sounds like we're violently agreeing on everything, doesn't it? But that's good. That is really good. So for me, coming out of this is humanity has come back to work. All right, we no longer have separate work and personal lives. We're looking for our leaders to lead us personally. Everybody is being touched by this pandemic. For the first time, something has touched leaders as well as all of our employees in every way. We mustn't lose that. And honestly, the feedback I'm getting across the board from all the organisations I'm working for is, how do we make sure our leaders continue to lead in a authentic human way, which all the way, interesting, comes back all the way to our values. So people are looking at what's important to them, be that society, environmental, family. Family is going to go way up the radar with people now. So something for us all to hold on to. Moving to the way we work, I am absolutely a believer now. It won't be about whether you work from home or from the office. Your location should be virtual. It shouldn't matter where you work anymore. It's got to work for you personally. It's got to work for your business, but it's got to work for your customer as well. And it's going to be that relationship that's really important. However, we know from all the evidence that actually it's really important, one, to have a social piece. We really miss that, and it affects our mental and physical health if we don't have that. But equally, we're not as creative and innovative as we might be if we aren't able to come together in groups. So I think, and I have used this term, we have leapfrogged transformation. 3 to 5 years is the average view at the moment. And we are now moved to a virtual working environment where people will come together, and it might be office space, be it London or elsewhere, to be creative, innovative, and do teamwork. But those teams might not look the way they used to be. They might be flexible pools of resources, they might be specific skills, they might be project-based. And actually, the research is showing that the optimum time for a team to be together in a fixed way is 3 months. You need to change that team in some way to keep the creativity and innovation going. So I think we're also at a pivotal point now, not just for where do we work, but how do we work, and how can we really maximize the opportunities that come out of this with creativity and innovation moving forward.
Keith?
Yeah, I think, so to your last question, a couple of quick observations before I go on to that. The first thing is, I think what we're all recognizing is when everyone's on Teams or Zoom or whatever you use, actually you're in the meeting. Previously, before lockdown, it always felt that those joining through remote actually weren't really in the meeting at all. In fact, you could often see it was quite painful for them to have to listen because the real meeting was in the room. So I think one of the things that we've learned from this is that when you have meetings, you're either all in the room or you're all on remote, because it's far more engaging and far more energizing. So that's one of the things. Just anecdotally, from a part of our membership, there's obviously in the personal finance side where they have a lot of elderly clients. Many have been shocked by just how tech savvy their 80-year-old clients are. Often motivated now or educated by their grandchildren or children who want to see them every week, who want to do the family quiz. So all of a sudden it's dynamically changing a level of engagement that previously people thought wouldn't be the preferred method by the client or the customer. So I think that just that observation as well, that's going to drive change. But I think as we come to the end, I think there are some unintended consequences. So I think, we've just launched any time, anywhere. So I think to Annette's point, we are accepting that really you can often get more productivity if you take a different approach. So we definitely don't want to go backwards. We want to move forward. The flip side is, of course, there's a risk of there are those people that don't find it easy to work from home. You can potentially lose that creativity and personal development that you get when people come together, where actually you learn sometimes by talking to someone at the coffee machine rather than through a training session. So I think some of those things we have to think about carefully, and how we bring teams together to make sure we don't lose any of that developmental opportunity and personal interaction. We've had a few people join us during this lockdown period, so we're obviously engaging with them on their real experience of what has it really meant for them, how they found that experience. And I guess the other thing that we're spotting as we return to a completely different way of working is making sure that we continue to be attractive to a diverse workforce. In other words, that we have got the environment that can bring people in to the workplace. Otherwise, we might end up in 2 or 3 years' time with a dynamically different profile of employees. So we're kind of thinking hard about that as well, making sure that I guess when you go through a change program, and the number that I've been in, the phrase in the end becomes, be careful you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So there are some clear benefits of interaction. I'm hearing people that are getting a bit fatigued now by being remote. So I think one of the big wishes that keeps coming out every time you ask someone is, I can't wait to get socialising again. I'm sure they probably mean down the pub rather than in the office, but nonetheless.
Yes. Mark?
I mean, I spent a good portion of my life amongst other entrepreneurs and working with intrapreneurs, and there is no doubt that having ideas created in a face-to-face single room is by far the best way forward. So I think it would be a horrible, sad truth if that got lost somewhere in here. So I think in the coming back, we absolutely need to get in there and have, and I think it kind of Annette mentioned it, the ideas kind of factory that you meet in a kind of community in a social space. I would put a shout out. I do some work with the Trampery, and I would put a shout out for their CEO, Charles Armstrong, and some Medium. He's an avid writer on Medium. He wrote very much on this subject recently, so I would push back to that about how he wants to recoalesce the creation that goes on there. So I feel that's going to be a step way back. Actually, to Keith's point about kind of being in the room and out of the room. I think there's equally a danger on the flip side of it. If we don't get people in a room, if we don't have that community, I just think naturally people will start making their own mind up about their siloed thoughts of what they think right looks like, and I think that will be a massive retrograde step, particularly in the London insurance market. I think that the lovely in the one room, as it were, and physically has been a great thing. So I really worry about that. And from I know we're not here to talk about brand and the like, it's more about people, but I think from that one business brand and some of the reputational things that could come out of that, businesses have got to be really, really careful about making sure that they're actually in that one physical and philosophical space going forward.
Julie, and so we're running out of time, so if you can perhaps give your answer in about a minute, that'd be much appreciated.
Okay. Well, I think much of what needs to be said has been said. The speed of transition says that the industry was more ready than we thought, and so I think the combination of being technologically ready and individuals finding that they can work like this, and back to the point that has been made several times, that doesn't mean that everybody finds it easy. It doesn't mean it's right for everybody, and nor is it right for everything, which is, everybody has already said collaboration and innovation definitely finds its way faster when you're in a face-to-face environment. It's quite difficult when you're kind of navigating screens, but not impossible. And new technology is being created to enable that, and the technology is being created faster now to enable that. So I do think there will be new answers to some of the things that we see as a challenge in this working environment. But I don't think there's anybody that thinks that face-to-face doesn't have a place in our future, and that engaging on a relationship level and a social level is better achieved in some face-to-face mechanism. But it just doesn't mean that it's everybody in the same place all of the time. And we certainly need better technology to interconnect teams in a room and teams on a screen. So I think that's coming. I think we'll find a way, and the industries that are building the kit that we're working with will find a way to make the combination that at the moment, Keith, I agree with you, is a little bit difficult. You either should all be in the room or all be in this kind of room. I think that's going to get conquered fairly soon too. So I think the future's bright, as they say. We just got to protect what's good and learn to live with the combination.
Yeah. Chris?
The future is about flexibility, and it is about the balance of human touch and digital frameworks moving forward. And I do believe we do have a great opportunity in this industry. We have catapulted our way forward many years. And for us now to, I think where I sit, is we've opened up, I think we will open up a whole avenue of new type of talent that'll be interested in working in insurance. We've recently, only 25% of our IT force comes from the industry. We bring them in from the outside, and I think we need to continue to make our industry attractive to new types of talent. And I think we can only do this where we are. So I think it's a great place to be right now.
Lizzie, finally, you've got about a minute to quickly express your views.
I agree with everything. My only addition is around our future talent and where we're nurturing people, and specifically apprenticeships. We need to give some thought to how we attain that knowledge transfer, which sometimes can be done within the office, and it's almost via osmosis throughout being surrounded by individuals and hearing those types of conversations. I don't have the solution, but it's absolutely a priority for me. Okay, well, on that note, this is obviously a subject that insurance agents, insurance players are going to be covering and watching very closely over the coming months, because obviously we've all been part of it, as you've all said. We've all had to go and work from home and basically adapt to this new environment. But thank you very much, Annette, Mark, Julie, Keith, Chris and Lizzie. Thank you very much for your opinions and views.
Welcome, pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.
As I said at the start, this is brought to you by Insurance Age and Insurance Post. If you would like to subscribe or to register for either title, then please use the tab which is up here in the bar. But until the next COVID cast, it's goodbye from me, and stay safe, everybody. Cheerio.